The rain fell in thin, shimmering threads over the city that night, blurring lights into bleeding halos and turning every sidewalk into a mirror of quiet heartbreak. In the middle of that blurred world stood a woman clutching her coat tightly around her trembling body, her breath white in the cold. She looked like someone who had been standing at the edge of her life for far too long, eyes carrying storms, hands carrying scars, heart carrying secrets she had no strength left to hide, and yet she wasn't crying. She had simply grown too tired for tears. Just a few steps away, a man stepped out of a towering glass building, his suit immaculate, his expression carved from stone. The kind of man everyone feared but no one truly knew. A single dad, a CEO, a man who built his empire out of silence and discipline. Their worlds should never have collided, but they did. The moment she softly approached him under the rain and whispered the most unexpected question a stranger could ask a powerful man, "Can you pretend to be my date, just for tonight?" If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected encounters, make sure to like this video, share it, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more emotional and inspiring stories like this. Her name was Eliana, though he didn't know that yet. He only saw a woman whose desperation wasn't loud, just quietly breaking through the spaces between her breaths. She stood in front of Ethan Ward, one of the youngest self-made CEOs in the city, a man known for his cold demeanor and sharper decisions. But in that moment, she wasn't asking a CEO for help. She was asking a man, one who she hoped still had kindness, left somewhere beneath the weight of his own burdens. Ethan, soaked in the rain, watched her with cautious curiosity. She wasn't dressed for attention. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked like someone who had been running not from danger but from her life itself. And yet her eyes carried a softness that disarmed him in ways he didn't understand. Eliana never planned to ask a stranger for help, but standing outside the Grand Restaurant, where her estranged family was already gathered, she felt her heart cave in. They had always belittled her, always reminded her of what she didn't have, of how she didn't live up to their expectations. Tonight was supposed to be her chance to prove she was doing okay, better even. But when her so-called boyfriend canceled last minute, and she had no strength left to endure their cruelty alone, she panicked. The first person she saw when she turned away from the restaurant was Ethan. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was sheer desperation. But something about him, his presence, the steadiness in his stance, made her believe he wouldn't hurt her. Not tonight. Ethan wasn't used to being asked for anything personal. People needed his money, his connections, his influence, never him. But something in the way her voice cracked slightly at the end made him pause. For the first time in months, he didn't think about his schedule, or his meeting, or the long empty nights waiting for him at home once his daughter fell asleep. Instead, he found himself wondering what kind of pain could make a stranger ask such a vulnerable favor. A single father learns to read the silent language of fear, exhaustion, and heartbreak, and Ethan saw all three in her. So he held out his hand, not because he believed her story yet, but because he recognized the loneliness in her eyes. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, he was tired of his own loneliness too. Inside the warm glow of the restaurant, Eliana felt her heart race faster with every step. She had grown up in those halls of polished marble and empty affection. She knew exactly how her family would react. Her mother's sharp gaze scanning her clothes, her sister's smirk hiding behind a glass of expensive wine, her father's silence colder than winter. But as she walked in, with Ethan beside her, tall, composed, unmistakably confident, their reactions froze. The room that once made her feel small suddenly felt manageable. Even her sister, Clara, who had built her entire identity around appearing superior, stared at Ethan with blatant disbelief. Eliana wasn't used to attention, but tonight, the entire table couldn't look away. Ethan noticed everything. The stiff smiles, the measured insults disguised as polite comments, the way Eliana kept folding her hands under the table when she felt overwhelmed. It reminded him painfully of his late wife's family, people who judged without understanding, who valued perfection over compassion. He didn't like these people, but he liked the way Eliana tried so hard to keep her composure despite them. He admired the quiet strength in her. Every time her voice wavered, he stepped in, not dramatically, not possessively, but gently, subtly, like a shield she didn't know how to ask for. For the first time in years, her family saw her without pity. They saw her with someone who treated her with respect and tenderness, and for the first time in her life, Eliana felt what it was like to not be invisible. Ethan wasn't acting anymore. Not really. There was an ease between them that surprised him. For years, he lived like a machine, working, providing, protecting his daughter, and burying pieces of himself with every passing day. But tonight, he found himself laughing softly at her shy remarks, noticing the dimples that appeared when she smiled, admiring her resilience, and the way she carried her pain with quiet pride. She didn't chase wealth. She didn't worship success. She simply wanted to survive her own family's cruelty, and he found himself deeply moved by that. After dinner, they walked outside under the now quiet drizzle. The city seemed to breathe differently at night, as if waiting to see what would unfold between them. Ileana stood beneath a street lamp, her hair shining with rain, and Ethan wondered why a stranger could suddenly feel so familiar. Something about her broke through the walls he spent years building. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to use him. She wasn't pretending to be strong. She simply was, and it was enough. Ileana tried to apologize for dragging him into her mess, but Ethan shook his head before she could finish. He had seen too much pain in her eyes to walk away like it meant nothing. She confessed slowly, hesitantly, that she wasn't doing great financially, that she'd been struggling to find a stable job, and that tonight's dinner was supposed to prove she was finally worth something. Ethan felt a quiet ache in his chest. Not because she was weak, because life had been too cruel to someone who deserved far better. She thought her worth needed proving. She didn't realize she had a heart far stronger than anyone in that restaurant. He drove her home, and the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was soft, healing. The world outside blurred into streaks of gold and silver. For the first time since his wife died, Ethan didn't dread going home. Her presence softened him. Her honesty disarmed him. When they reached her small apartment, she looked embarrassed by how simple it was, but Ethan admired it. It reflected her humble, warm, real. She thanked him, expecting to never see him again. People like him didn't linger in the lives of women like her. But Ethan didn't pull away. He asked if she was safe, asked if she needed help, asked if maybe they could talk again. His voice wasn't commanding or polished like it usually was. It was almost shy, and that surprised them both. Ileana smiled softly, her eyes shining with something fragile, something hopeful. She said yes. The days that followed were unexpected. Ethan found himself thinking about her during meetings, checking his phone for her messages, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. Ileana, too, found herself smiling more, feeling lighter, noticing the small joys life offered. They weren't dating. Not officially. But every interaction wove a thread between them, a connection neither of them planned, like a hidden bridge forming between two wounded souls. The turning point came when she met Ethan's daughter, Lily, the little girl with the brightest smile and the biggest heart. Instantly adored Ileana. And Ethan saw something he hadn't seen in a long time: his daughter laughing freely, clinging to someone other than him, looking at Ileana like she was a long-lost friend. Ileana's tenderness with Lily touched something deep inside Ethan, something he thought had died with his wife. Watching them together felt like sunlight warming a room that had been cold for years. But love, real love, doesn't come without shadows. Clara, Ileana's sister, began to interfere. The idea of Ileana dating a millionaire CEO was something she refused to accept. She started spreading rumors, accusing Ileana of manipulating him for money. Ethan ignored the noise at first, but when Ileana stopped replying to his messages for 2 full days, he felt a familiar terror, fear of losing someone he was growing to care for deeply. When he finally found her, she was sitting alone on a park bench, hugging her knees. She explained everything: how her family had attacked her, how they made her believe she wasn't good enough for a man like him, how they planted seeds of doubt she couldn't shake. Ethan sat beside her, listening to every trembling word, and then he told her what he had been afraid to admit even to himself, that he didn't care about her past, her job status, or her complicated family. He cared about her heart, her kindness, her courage. He cared about the way she treated his daughter, the way she made him feel human again. He cared, deeply, quietly, undeniably. That night, under a sky dusted with stars, something inside Ileana shifted. For years, she believed she wasn't enough, but in Ethan's eyes, she saw her worth reflected clearly for the first time. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't the success story her family demanded. But she was loved not for what she had, but for who she was. Love didn't sweep them away in dramatic waves. It grew in slow, steady warmth in shared meals, gentle conversations, small moments of trust and laughter. Ethan helped her find a job at one of his partner companies, not out of pity, but because he believed in her. She flourished. She grew. She began to heal. And Ethan healed too, piece by piece, every time she smiled at him or held his daughter's hand. Months later, at the same restaurant where their pretend story began, Ethan took her back, not as a stranger helping her survive her family, but as the man who had fallen in love with her for real. Her family watched them enter again. But this time, she didn't shrink. She didn't tremble. She didn't need to prove anything. She belonged somewhere now, with people who loved her, with a man who chose her every day. And when Ethan gently placed his hand over hers at the table, the entire room faded away. It didn't matter what anyone thought. They had found each other in a world that had been cruel to them both. They had built something tender in place of all the brokenness. They had given love a second chance. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating beautiful, emotional stories for you. Special request, comment below. Love deserves a second chance if you believe their story was meant to be.